On the evening of September the 9th of 2017, a mother and child lost their lives in a car accident after they fled their Florida home ahead of Hurricane Irma. 28-year-old Caitlin Hunt and her newborn baby Riley drove to their family's home in Woodstock, Georgia, to take shelter from the impending storm. At around 8 p.m., they attempted to cross Arnold Mill Road with a family friend, 61-year-old Kathy Deming, but were mowed down by a passing SUV. The victims were rushed to the hospital, but Riley passed away almost immediately upon arrival. 3 days later, Caitlin succumbed to her injuries as well. Deming's death followed on September the 19th. It wasn't until May of 2018 that charges were filed against Zoe Wren, the driver of the SUV, who was aged 17 at the time of the deadly incident. Reardon was arrested on several charges, including second-degree vehicular homicide, distracted driving, and use of an electronic communication device under the age of 18. She was released on a $10,715 bond. 10 months later, Reardon pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 3 years of probation. Her license was also suspended for at least a year. As part of her sentence, she was required to complete 240 hours of community service and safe driver training. Additionally, the team was ordered to pay around $4,000 in fines that could be reduced if she donated to a foundation that works to combat distracted driving. Number 9. Courtney Thompson. An alleged member of a Crips gang subset was caught on video flinging water on 2 New York Police Department officers in Brooklyn in July of 2019. The officers were responding to a call on East New York Avenue when the incident occurred. As the cops walked away without making any arrests, Courtney Thompson continued his aquatic attack. After footage of the incident went viral, the police department told its officers they weren't expected to tolerate having water thrown at them. 28-year-old Thompson, who was on probation at the time, surrendered himself at the 73rd Precinct Station House on July the 24th. A number of charges were filed against the man, including obstruction of governmental administration and disorderly conduct. 5 months later, Thompson pleaded guilty to a second-degree harassment charge after the 2 officers involved had given their approval for the plea deal. According to the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office, Thompson was required to serve 10 days of community service as part of the agreement. In the aftermath, police officers were reportedly furious about the outcome. A police source questioned the penalty given, saying it was an indication that there were no consequences for dumping water on a police officer. Number 8. Jacob Walter Anderson. Texas man Jacob Walter Anderson, who'd been indicted on 4 counts of assault, avoided jail time and having to register as an offender after accepting a plea deal. On February the 20th of 2015, a woman at a Phi Delta Theta party in the city of Waco was reportedly handed some punch and told to drink it. As soon as she did so, however, she became disoriented. Anderson, who was the fraternity president, allegedly took her outside to a secluded area and forced himself upon her. During the course of the assault, the woman blacked out and later woke up face down on the ground in a pool of her own vomit. The victim was taken to the hospital for an assault examination. Following Baylor University's investigation, 20-year-old Anderson was expelled. According to court records, Anderson accepted a plea deal in late August of 2018. He pleaded no contest to a charge of unlawful restraint. On October the 15th of that same year, he was given no jail time but was ordered to pay a $400 fine and complete alcohol, drug, and psychological treatment plans. Upon completion of the 3 years of deferred probation, Anderson's criminal record would be wiped clean. The victim was infuriated by the plea agreement, saying she'd been through hell and back, but they let the one responsible for her trauma essentially go free. Number 7. Travis Elwell. A Texas man was ordered to serve 1 week in jail every year on the anniversary of a fatal car crash he caused on February the 10th of 2015. 23-year-old Travis Elwell was speeding through the 4000 block of McKinney Avenue in uptown Dallas. Meanwhile, 34-year-old Emily Javadi was in the area loading items into her car when Elwell's BMW crashed into her Lexus. The collision sent Javadi into a metal pole. She was transported to Parkland Memorial Hospital, where she was pronounced dead about an hour after the crash. Elwell, who reportedly had 0.175 blood alcohol content, was arrested and charged with intoxication manslaughter. 2 years later, he was convicted of the charge and given what was widely considered a lenient sentence of 120 days behind bars, followed by a week in jail on the anniversary of Javadi's death for 9 years. As part of a plea deal, he was given 10 years probation, during which drinking alcohol would be prohibited and undergoing multiple daily breathalyzer tests was required. Additionally, he was ordered to attend Alcoholics Anonymous meetings and speak at groups for people charged with driving under the influence. In an interview, the victim's parents said that the only thing that was important to them was accountability for Elwell's irresponsible actions. They added that they weren't interested in seeing Elwell locked up for life. Number 6. Rhys Bennett. In the Scottish city of Aberdeen, a man convicted of homicide and assault had his life sentence reduced by 5 years. On September the 17th of 2022, 47-year-old Jill Barkley was attacked as she was walking home after a night out. Rhys Bennett stomped on Barkley, beating her head and body, compressing her neck and dragging her along the ground. The 23-year-old subsequently forced himself on her on the grounds of an empty property at Farburn Gatehouse. The man left her badly injured, then returned shortly after and continued the onslaught. He reportedly poured a can of gasoline on the victim and set her on fire. Barkley's lifeless body was found at around 3:30 a.m. after fire crews were called to the scene. CCTV footage analyzed during the ensuing investigation led to Bennett's arrest later that day. On May the 24th of 2023, Bennett admitted to the harrowing crimes he'd committed, which according to Judge Lord Arthurson were wicked and medieval in their barbarity. After pleading guilty, Bennett was given a sentence of 24 years, reduced from at least 29 because of his early plea and age. Number 5. Joachim Horbricks. The New York Police Department was unable to arrest the German United Nations attaché accused of beating his wife because of constraints related to diplomatic immunity. The incident in question took place in the couple's Manhattan apartment on October the 19th of 2016. 56-year-old Joachim Horbricks told his wife of 16 years to cease communication with her friends. The woman, 35-year-old Henna Johnson, continued texting, causing Horbricks to lash out, allegedly throwing pillows at her and screaming. The couple then went into their bedrooms where Horbricks threw Johnson against the wall, hitting her head and leaving her with a black eye. Johnson called the police. However, the officers said they couldn't investigate Horbricks because he had immunity. All they could do was offer to take the woman to a hotel or get her medical attention, but she declined both offers. According to Johnson, her husband said he didn't remember anything the following morning and was very apologetic. A State Department spokesman said that Horbricks could be required to leave the country if his immunity wasn't waived. In the aftermath, the United States asked the German government to drop Horbricks' immunity. When the request was rejected, Horbricks and his wife returned to Germany in the first week of November. Number 4. Sakulas. A traffic collision that occurred on August the 27th of 2019 resulted in the death of 19-year-old Harry Dunn. The young Englishman was riding his motorcycle near Crofton, a Northamptonshire village, when an SUV traveling in the opposite direction and on the wrong side of the road collided with him. Dunn was taken to the Major Trauma Centre of John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford, where he was pronounced dead. The driver of the SUV, 42-year-old Sakulas, cooperated with law enforcement at the scene of the crash. Sakulas, who was working for the U.S. intelligence community at the time and was the wife of a CIA employee stationed in the area in question, was interviewed by investigators the next day. She admitted to driving on the wrong side of the road and colliding with the victim in the middle of September. British police found out that Sakulas had left the country and claimed diplomatic immunity with U.S. support. She pleaded guilty in October of 2022 and was handed an 8-month suspended sentence. She was disqualified from driving for 12 months on December the 8th of 2022. Number 3. Grace Huff. 20-year-old Montana Sullivan was killed during a trip to Oklahoma to visit family over Christmas break. Authorities learned that Sullivan was riding in a vehicle with 21-year-old Grace Huff near Northwest 150th Street and Pennsylvania Avenue on December the 27th of 2019. Huff allegedly discharged a gun in the car at some point, and Sullivan was hit. Huff then dropped Sullivan off at a hospital where she succumbed to the gunshot wound. Oklahoma City police officers arrested Huff on a charge of first-degree murder. The charge was later amended to manslaughter in July of 2020. Investigators said that evidence suggested the shooting was an accident. 8 months later, Huff was convicted and consequently received a 20-year sentence, half of which she'd served behind bars and the other half on probation. She was also ordered to reappear for a 1-year review. The victim's father said the family wasn't happy that Huff could possibly have her sentence commuted. In March of 2022, during the 1-year review, Huff's sentence was reduced to 2 years of house arrest. In addition, she was ordered to pay restitution to the Sullivan family of $6,000 every year for 8 years. Number 2. Debbie Newbury. In several incidents of fraud spanning from October of 2014 to November of 2017, an Englishwoman stole at least $50,000 from her 94-year-old client who was suffering from dementia. Debbie Newbury of Worksop was initially employed by Margaret Hartshorn's family as a cleaner, but later became her full-time caretaker. After discovering the 32-year-old's pernicious scheme, the family accused her of fraud. During her resulting trial at Nottingham Crown Court on July the 22nd of 2019, the prosecutor said that Newbury was previously given a 270-day suspended sentence for stealing jewelry from 2 homes where she'd worked as a cleaner in 2010. The victim's family told Lincolnshire Live that they hadn't been informed of her criminal record before she was hired. They said that they expected Newbury to get 3 years in prison. However, after Newbury pleaded guilty to fraud by abuse of position, she was only sentenced to 15 months behind bars. If you haven't yet seen our video on the toughest judges, some of whom literally fought defendants, then stay tuned after number 1. Number 1. Joshua Lee Jeffrey. 20-year-old Joshua Lee Jeffrey battered 6 endangered penguins to death on Tasmania's Sulphur Creek Beach on New Year's Day in 2016. As the cold-blooded attack unfolded, a witness overheard the commotion and subsequently discovered the fairy penguins. Pathology evidence presented in court in April revealed that the animals had fractures consistent with blunt force trauma and that the attack had gone on for several minutes. 2 months later, Jeffrey was found guilty of several animal cruelty charges, including 1 count of aggravated cruelty to animals. The presiding magistrate, Tamara Jago, called the suspect's behavior callous and said that the birds were an easy target. Jago took into account Jeffrey's psychological report, which indicated he had a processing disorder, intellectual development disorder, and ADHD. Jeffrey was ordered to serve 49 hours of community service and pay less than $61 in court costs. The sentence was appealed by prosecutors, giving way to Jeffrey's resentencing in October. Ultimately, he was ordered to serve 98 hours of community service and received a 2-month suspended jail sentence. Number 10. Marilee Ehrlich. Florida Judge Marilee Ehrlich was removed from her post after a video emerged in which she berated a sick defendant during a hearing on April 15th of 2018. 59-year-old Sandra Twiggs, who suffered from asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, was attending a hearing via video stream due to her health complications. Ehrlich grew irritated after Twiggs attempted to expound upon her answers on multiple occasions and coughed repeatedly. The judge could be heard ordering the ill woman not to say anything beyond what was being asked of her. When the defendant attempted to explain her health issues, Ehrlich refused to listen. 2 days after the hearing, Twiggs passed away at her home. Ehrlich was accused of aggressive and tyrannical behavior by public defender Howard Finkelstein in a letter addressed to Chief Administrative Judge Jack Tutter. In the aftermath of the incident, she was requested not to return to the bench. Number 9. Elizabeth Shearer.
You need to sit down right now. You're out of line. In fact, you're excused. You need to go sit in the back with your chief public defender.
Florida Circuit Judge Elizabeth Shearer, who presided over the Parkland school shooting case, had a heated confrontation with 2 of Nicholas Cruz's public defenders, Gordon Weeks and David Wheeler. on November the 1st of 2022. The argument occurred during Cruz's sentencing hearing, when Weeks and Wheeler expressed the sentiment that their team was being personally attacked by the parents of the victims. Weeks asked the judge to forbid the parents from using the court as a platform to vent their frustrations, considering their statements as an incitement to violence. Assistant State Attorney Carolyn McCann protested, stating it was their right to express themselves and that they'd only responded to the question, "Would you like to say something on behalf of the victim you are representing?" Shearer ordered the defense attorneys to sit down, but Weeks instead approached the stand, accusing the judge of expressing the same misdirected anger toward the defense team as the victim's parents. When Shearer once more ordered him to take a seat, Weeks asked multiple times for a sidebar or recess, but his petitions were denied. Shearer subsequently admonished the defense for laughing with their client and even making an obscene gesture at the court during the trial. She reprimanded the men for mentioning her own children in their argument, telling them they were out of line and stating they'd be moving on to sentencing, prompting Weeks to storm out of the courtroom. Number 8. John McBain.
You were relentless. You stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed, you stabbed until he was dead.
When 31-year-old Camilla Gamet laughed during her victim's family impact statements on April the 16th of 2014, Jackson County, Missouri judge John McBain furiously admonished her. Gamet, who was accused of fatally stabbing her boyfriend, 38-year-old Marcel Hill, 11 times, rolled her eyes and interrupted a statement being made by Hill's aunt. McBain subsequently warned the woman he'd duct tape her mouth closed if she didn't shut up. He went on to call the case one of the worst cold-blooded murders he'd ever seen. During sentencing, McBain once more expressed resentment towards Gamet, stating, "You gutted him like a fish in that apartment. I hope you die in prison. If this was a death penalty state, you'd be getting the cheer." Gamet was sentenced to life in prison. Her lawyers indicated they would appeal the punishment, claiming their client had acted in self-defense. Number 7. Aubrey Rhymes. On January the 7th of 2021, Pike County, Missouri judge Aubrey Rhymes got into a physical altercation with a defendant, 27-year-old Sydney Newsom. The latter, who'd been charged with domestic violence, grew irate during the court proceedings and proceeded to throw a stack of papers at the judge. After the bailiff had been unable to restrain him, Rhymes stepped out of his seat and pinned the defendant on the table until deputies entered the courtroom and took charge of the situation. Newsom's brother was subsequently arrested for getting involved in the struggle. Newsom had counts of contempt of court and simple assault added to his list of offenses. Fortunately, no one got hurt during the fight. Nevertheless, it was reported that security would be increased during the remainder of the case's proceedings in order to keep everyone involved safe. Number 6. Wayne Culver.
Hold on. Sir, I'm doing something. Can you shut up and sit down? That's not shutting up. You want to be held in contempt and go to jail? I asked you a question. Then shut up.
Florida Judge Wayne Culver faced a possible suspension of up to 60 days for getting into heated arguments with several defendants, cursing in court and unlawfully sentencing someone to 537 days in jail for contempt. The first incident took place on January the 25th of 2022. When the defendant interrupted the proceedings, Culver told him that if he spoke out of term again, he'd be charged with contempt of court, leading to additional time in jail. He issued an initial sentence of 179 days, which sparked a back and forth that led to Culver warning, "If you keep on interrupting us, you're going to have the jail renamed after you." By the end of the contentious interaction, Culver had sentenced the defendant to 537 days behind bars. He went back on this sentence, however, as it wouldn't be legally enforceable, and reduced the ruling to 179 days. The second incident occurred on February the 10th of 2022. It reportedly involved 50-year-old Kevin Newton, who'd arrived late to his hearing and was trying to take his seat when Culver demanded he sit down and shut up. When the defendant replied, the judge threatened to hold him in contempt of court while issuing him an expletive-laden insult. For his inappropriate outbursts, Culver was recommended an unpaid 60-day suspension and was also ordered to complete an anger management and sensitivity training course. Number 5. Wanda Evans. On June the 2nd of 2017, a man was removed from a Detroit courtroom following a heated verbal exchange with the judge. 46-year-old Anthony Thornton, who was accused of criminal misconduct, screamed at Judge Wanda Evans, "I'm innocent," before hurling profanities at her. Evans demanded the defendant be quiet, but when he refused, she instructed court officials to remove him, saying, "I'm not even going to dignify that comment." Thornton was taken from the courtroom and Evans continued with the hearing, in which it was determined that the defendant would be found not guilty of kidnapping, but guilty of unlawful imprisonment and misconduct. Before ending the proceedings, the judge ordered Thornton to be brought back so she could further reprimand him for his actions. The defendant subsequently apologized for the outburst. During a previous unrelated sentencing hearing on January the 23rd of 2017, Judge Evans was involved in a similarly contentious interaction when she scolded a defense attorney for accusing her of not properly reviewing a report. The lawyer, Terry Price, had requested a day to further review the documents, but was only allowed an hour. Price proceeded to tell Evans she didn't have enough time to properly read the report either, but the judge sternly ordered him to drop the issue. Number 4. Matthew Sipniewski. Dutch judge Matthew Sipniewski from Rotterdam called 29-year-old Daquan Green a sociopath during a sentencing hearing on January the 21st of 2021. Green, who'd been found guilty of second-degree murder, professed his innocence throughout the trial, prompting Sipniewski to angrily rebuke him, saying, "You are not just a murderer, you are a sociopath." Green was sentenced to 25 years, likely to be served in a maximum security facility, although Sipniewski remarked that he wished he could have given him a life term without the possibility of parole. Number 3. Olu Stevens. Kentucky Judge Olu Stevens of the judicial circuit that presides over Jefferson County sentenced Adam Satterley to 60 days in jail after he used a racial slur in court. On January the 4th of 2016, Satterley reportedly issued the racially charged insult in response to Stevens revoking his bond. The judge at first seemed willing to let the remark go, but subsequently ordered the defendant back into the courtroom, at which point he asked Satterley if he had anything to say about the insult. The defendant denied having addressed the court, stating he'd been speaking to his brother, but Stevens wasn't swayed by his explanation. He reprimanded Satterley, warning him never to use the word in question again, after which he sentenced him to 60 days in jail. Number 2. Robin Lehmanitis. On February the 5th of 2020, Judge Robin Lehmanitis was publicly reprimanded for intemperate behavior during proceedings of the Florida Supreme Court. Lehmanitis had allegedly made inappropriate remarks about defendants Skylar Francis and Anthony Welch during hearings in November of 2018 and March of 2021. The most incendiary statements were made during sentencing. In one case, Lehmanitis told the defendant he wasn't worthy of life in prison, while she wished another would have to fight for his life every minute of every day. The Supreme Court admonished the judge for her comments, determining it had served only the purpose of abusing and insulting the recipients. Lehmanitis admitted her problematic behavior and was ordered to undergo stress management counseling to help with her outbursts.
And we required you to appear here today for this public reprimand in this public forum. For these failings, Judge Lehmanitis, you are hereby publicly reprimanded. You're now free to leave.
Number 1. Eugene Lucci. On March the 1st of 2019, 32-year-old Manson Bryant accused Ohio Judge Eugene Lucci of being racially biased against him after he was sentenced to 22 years in prison for aggravated burglary, robbery, and kidnapping. Bryant unloaded a minutes-long tirade, repeatedly insulting the judge and calling him a racist. During the sentencing hearing, Lucci felt Bryant had shown some remorse for his crimes, leading him to decide against giving the defendant the maximum possible term of 28 years behind bars. Following Bryant's outburst, however, he extended the original sentence. The interaction in question wasn't the first time Bryant and Lucci had gotten into an argument in court. Back in 2014, the former had snapped at the judge after pleading guilty to receiving stolen property and receiving a year in prison as punishment. The man's legal defense team filed an appeal against Lucci's decision, with the Supreme Court reportedly ruling 4-3 in favor of Bryant.
Let him go. Let me out! Let's take him out. Let me out, man! I swear to God, turn up this bitch.
Does counsel waive the...
Let me out!
Thanks for watching. Would you rather spend a year in jail or have a year taken off of your life? Let us know in the comments section below.